they say that a data scientist is somebody who knows more statistics than a software engineer, but knows more coding than a statistician. So I think you have to be at that juncture
Somewhere in the
where,
middle.
yeah, somewhere in the middle. But when it comes to interviews, your interview is going to mostly solely test you on technical skills. So make sure that that is strong as well. And that actually the formula is pretty standard, that do a little bit of coding on all of these coding websites. One advice that I would give is probably to find local mentors or people that you know who are close to you, who you can talk to probably, like, let's say at least once a month. So we work on something called A/B testing. So over there, like, you're trying to see if a green button would work better than a red button or not, like which is working better.
Hey, welcome back everyone. I'm Ishan Sharma, and in this podcast episode, we will be learning from Juhi Singh. How did she get started with data science and how did she become a data scientist at Coursera? She is currently working as a data scientist at Coursera, and we'll just be learning from her how did she transfer from a finance background, as she did her finance masters from MIT US, to now working as a data scientist at Coursera, right? I hope you will get tons of value from this. If you are wondering about how to get started with data science, what are the great projects that you can do, how can you make a profile, a resume that would be great for a data science job position, then make sure that you watch this video till the very end. You will learn a lot from this. Okay, so yeah, I hope you will enjoy this. She is also a BITS Pilani alumni, and I did a completely different interview with her talking about her experience with BITS Pilani and MIT. I'll link it somewhere over here, so go watch that if you want to. But yeah, now let's continue with this podcast episode. That's amazing. And like, okay, so now that you've gone from MIT, so tell me a little bit about how did you come into the data scientist role from Coursera? Yeah.
So initially, when I joined the finance program, I was really into finance because I was working in finance in Mumbai in Credit Suisse. That too, I think the internship I got from my PS2 was what led me there. So I feel like I attribute all of it to BITS, that having an economics degree and having a really good GPA landed me with that internship in Credit Suisse. And then I was able to convert that PS2 into a full-time job. And then just having Credit Suisse in my resume actually impress the MIT admissions committee, I suppose, that it's actually a pretty well-known financial institution.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So given the fact that I had 2 years of work experience, because 1 year as an intern and 1 year as a full-time employee, I think that really helped. So I really wanted to work on Wall Street and like earn a lot of money, have my own penthouse. But then, and I did get a really good internship in a company called BlackRock. It is the largest asset management company in the world. It is on Wall Street. So all of my dreams were getting fulfilled with that internship. And I was working as a quant intern. So there was nothing better that I could have asked for. And I was very happy when I got it. But when I started working there, I realized the other side of finance where it's pretty gloomy, or I wasn't really enjoying what I was doing, or even if I was enjoying it then, I could see that maybe 30 to 40 years down the line, that is not something that I would want to do. And also, after coming to the US, it opens up your horizons, or just makes you aware of all the other things that are happening. And to me, I feel like I'm a growth-oriented person, so I always want to be where there's growth. And I felt like in the past 30 years, most of the development that has come in the world has come from Silicon Valley, right? From semiconductors to anything that you can think of. Most of the value providing companies are in the Bay Area. So I was like, I want to be where all the action is. And I realized that, okay, if I want to be in the Bay Area, I'm not a software engineer. I don't have a coding background. I did know Python and SQL and R from my previous job and just picking it up along the way. And because of working in finance, I did have some number crunching abilities and some statistic knowledge because of economics. So I feel like in the end, it all kind of came together, because I always had a little bit of thing for coding, even though I didn't do it a lot. And because of my economics background, I had econometrics and all the statistics things done. So I realized that maybe data scientist is what I can aspire to. And so I started looking for data science roles in the Bay Area, and I ended up with Coursera.
Mm-hmm. What was the process like interviewing at Coursera? Because you've done a bunch of Coursera courses and then you went to interview for Coursera itself.
I feel like all of the Coursera courses that I did actually helped me get the job at Coursera, because all of the Python and R and SQL that I learned, half of it I learned on my job, and the other half I think I practiced on Coursera. So I already had a very high level of respect for Coursera. And it's very important to develop connections, I feel. So I actually had a BitSim friend who was working at Coursera at the time, and I reached out to all of my BitSim friends in the Bay Area, asking them if they would be willing to refer me to the companies. And he helped me, get a hang of the Bay Area, and also just helped me with the interviews.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I ended up at Coursera.
Okay, so like I want to ask, if someone wants to be a data scientist, is it really important to have a master's degree, or is it also possible just from a bachelor's degree to get into a data scientist role?
If you think about it, actually there aren't that many masters in data science, or at least I would say 4 or 5 years ago, there weren't that many masters in data science kinds of profiles. So I would say that it is definitely easy. It's definitely possible, but you will have to upskill yourself and try and make your profile appealing to these people. And there are like some standard ways of doing that. You have to know a little bit of coding. You have to know statistics. So they say that a data scientist is somebody who knows more statistics than a software engineer, but knows more coding than a statistician. So I think you have to be at that juncture,
somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, somewhere in the middle, where you're able to code and also you're able to understand statistics or machine learning as well. Yeah.
All right. And what does your day look like in Coursera as a data scientist?
So I mostly work with experimentations and causal inference with the product. So for example, let's say that if you are building, or let's say you are working for Flipkart, and Flipkart wants to know how can it grow its user base, or what kind of testing can it do, or where should it expand. So my role at a very high level is to be able to provide the data that the company needs to be able to grow. And everything else is secondary in terms of the tools that I use, in terms of the language that I code in terms of what visualization that I use, or what mechanics that I use to get at the data doesn't really matter. So it can range from doing like a differences in difference analysis, or doing a regression analysis, or just having like an unsupervised model training. That doesn't matter. But what matters is how am I able to help my company make more data informed decisions.
Okay. So, and for a lot of people that want to get into data science, how should they prepare for these interviews? Like when you want to get into a software engineer role, there's obviously HackerRank, there's Codeforces, and all these competitive coding websites. But for specifically data science, there's only like Kaggle. So like how should one proceed to prepare for these interviews?
That's a great question. I always feel like in your undergrad days, you can probably focus a little bit more on statistics, because statistics essentially is the foundation of data science, according to me. So be good at statistics, be good at, let's say, CP1, CP2, or I don't know what you guys call it.
We still have it right now in the first year, C++.
So I think that gives a good foundation, but on top of that, you have to know either one of the two languages, because it's mostly either Python or R. I would suggest that if somebody is not, let's say, in computer science, pick one language. If I had to give my preference, I would say pick Python, because Python just helps you in general in other aspects as well. But yeah, if you're an R person, go for R as well. But yeah, so for me, it would be get good at statistics, take a bunch of Coursera courses.
The good part about the Coursera courses is that they're providing us these free access, right? So especially with BITS, we have like unlimited courses we can do right now for free. So that's really amazing.
So you should definitely take those courses. I would say make use of the free courses that you have right now. I think there are a couple of really good specializations that we have. I think there's one called Data Science with Python, I think. I'm not sure. That's a good specialization just as an introduction. But also know that these are just courses. They will not prepare you for the real world completely. I think the best way to get a real world experience is probably to do Kaggle. I know that Kaggle is the only source. You don't have to enter competitions if you're not comfortable with it, but just start doing exercises. Start with exploratory data analysis. You don't have to jump into machine learning right away.
I think that most people end up doing the most common data sets, like you have the Titanic data set and the Seafire 10 and all. Yeah, I've done those, and those are pretty good. But like everyone does them, so like how do I stand out of the majority of people in my resume?
It's interesting because actually a majority of the resumes, because now that we also interview data science candidates, most of their resumes kind of look the same. Like everybody would have done an NLP on Twitter sentiment analysis, or like a couple of very standard projects that people do, or the same data sets that you see floating in Kaggle. I would say that is a good start. If you are able to try and get an intern in India about like data science and how do you get it. But I would say that even if you're able to get something in the first year itself, that's a good place to start, because nothing can train you as having some experience in the real world can. One advice that I would give is probably to find local mentors or people that you know who are close to you, who you can talk to probably, like, let's say at least once a month, who are working as data scientists, because the amount of training and information that they can give you is not something that even Kaggle can. And having a real human help you, and that is something that I feel I should have done a long time ago, is have mentors. So have at least a couple of people who are working in the data science field right now, who you can talk to every month or so. And they might be able to give you a more personalized recommendation about what you should be doing at that particular moment. Because whatever I tell you would probably be a very blanket advice, but what they would tell you would be more personal.
Okay.
So and there are a bunch of really good data science blogs as well. I personally like
Towards Data Science is a really amazing, I think, from Medium.
Towards Data Science is really amazing. If you want to see what people are doing in real time or in real companies, I would say Netflix has a really good blog. Stitch Fix has a really good blog about what they do. Airbnb's data science blog is pretty good. So I feel like try and find companies who are known to be at the forefront of data science, both in India as well as in the world, and then see what kind of problems are they trying to tackle. And if possible, then get a mentor and try and discuss those. I think that would give you a really good sense. But when it comes to interviews, your interview is going to mostly solely test you on technical skills. So make sure that that is strong as well. And that actually the formula is pretty standard, that do a little bit of coding on all of these coding websites. And then for the EDA stuff, I think this is what is best. Kaggle is probably the best option that you have.
What is the difference between a data scientist and a machine learning engineer, if there's a position like that? Because I've heard about that a little bit.
Yeah, I would say that a machine learning engineer probably does more software engineer things than a data scientist. A data scientist probably is more well equipped with statistic stuff. So in the domain of, and a data scientist is actually a pretty large term in the sense that a lot of data analysts could also have the term data scientists. But mostly the things that a data scientist does, which a machine learning engineer does not do, is probably work on experimentation. So we work on something called A/B testing. So over there, like you're trying to see if a green button would work better than a red button or not, like which is working better. Or you'll try to do a causal inference.
Design-wise, like in UI UX thing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, so let's say that for half of your customers, you're showing a red button, and for the other half, you're showing a green button. And then you see that people are more inclined to click the green button. Then that would mean that you should probably have the green button on your website. And you wouldn't believe how much of a difference can this make, because even if you increase, let's say, the click-throughs by 10%, that could actually mean like a $1 million increase in your revenue, like in a year. So those things really matter a lot. But then you also should know how to read the data. So in those cases, statistics really helps a lot. Knowing what kind of different tools or methods that you have. So I would say that be really good at econometrics things. So like regression analysis, differences in differences, controlled regression. What do these mean? How do you use that? So this is something that a data scientist might do, which a machine learning engineer might not do. Machine learning engineers mostly are also have to deploy code in production, because it's based on their machine learning model that spits out like real-time recommendation, for example, or real-time algorithms. So I think a lot of the work that data scientists do is behind the curtain. It is not happening in real time, but a lot of the things that machine learning engineers do. So they have to they have to be better at coding, I would say, than a regular data scientist.
All right. Now, one question I had personally is that I was recently learning about auto ML. These are automated models that a lot of companies like Salesforce and Google use. So what do you think? Is that going to reduce the demand for data scientists and all?
I don't think so, because yeah, those are some of the things that all of these niche companies or niche teams are doing. But that still means that you still want to have people to be looking at the data to be able to provide recommendations to the product directly. I would say that field is going to increase for sure, or that field is going to expand a lot. So yeah, if you are interested in deep learning or AI, I feel like this is the time to get into all of those domains. But that doesn't mean that the demand for data scientists might become obsolete. I don't see that happening for the next 10 to 15 years. Same is the case with software engineers as well, that technically, yeah, one day we might have AI writing code for us. But that doesn't mean that the demand for software engineers is going to go down anytime soon.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like there was this recent video on YouTube in which there was this one person who was talking about this application AI that was actually writing Python code, and all of us that were in college were like, "What will happen to us now?"
No, I think those days are still pretty far away, and I feel like right now, yeah, both the country as well as the world could use a lot more software engineers. Like even though there are so many software engineers out there, I feel like there's still a shortage of software engineers both in the US and in India. So, and same is the case for data scientists as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now the thing is, when I was like a little kid, when I was in 10th grade or something, I used to see all of these news, and they were saying that data science is the next big trend, data analysts and all. And so immediately everyone was like, become a data scientist, become a data scientist. So what do you see going forward into 2020 and beyond for the growth of this particular data scientist role? Will it increase? Will it decrease?
Oh, it would definitely increase, just because so there is this really interesting article, I forget by who, but it talks about the Maslow's hierarchy for data. If you get a chance, you should check it out. So it talks about it's like a pyramid of sorts, which talks about what are some of the fundamental things that you need in order for AI to be possible. I feel it begins with data infrastructure, which basically brings the data from all different sources into your database or data warehouse, whatever you have, followed by data engineering, followed by decision science, followed by machine learning, and then followed by AI. So it is very clear that if AI or all of these the niche things have to grow, everything underneath also has to grow. So the amount of data that we're dealing with right now is not something that we were dealing with 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, like right now, data science is the big thing. There was a time when big data was a big thing, but I feel like big data is still a big thing. And everything in that hierarchy is going to keep increasing. So I don't think we would ever hit a point where these things would go down, at least for the next 10 to 15 years. And the thing is that by the time you graduate and by the time you have worked in this industry for 10 to 15 years, you will be the experts in these fields, right? So that expertise would always be very high value in the market. Yeah.
All right. I have one last question for you, and that is, I was reading this book called Hello World by Hannah Fry. Inside of it, she was talking about how these ML models are biased towards, let's just say that there was this ML model that was used by police in US itself to determine if this particular prisoner would actually commit a crime again. And inside of that, what happened is that the people who were black, they had a more likely chance to commit another crime. So how do you take those biases into account and make sure that the models are not having these sorts of biases?
So yeah, actually this is a topic that is being discussed a lot, especially in the Bay Area right now, is that your model is as good as the data that you provided, and your model will be biased as long as the data is biased. And to your point, there are several studies, or biases will exist because of the way humans have designed the models, and it's not the model's fault as such. So to give a couple of other examples as well, so it seems that all of the car like the braking and the airbags and all of the mechanisms for protecting the driver while driving in case they have an accident, they were actually built assuming that the average driver is an adult male, and adult males obviously have a much higher, let's say, body weight or height or strength or even neck strength for that matter compared to an average female who will probably be shorter in height. And so that and by doing this, you're actually, and this is something that's really dangerous, right? That you are only catering to half of the population, and the other half is in actual physical danger of not being protected by whatever mechanisms you have. Or that because the data had so many, like over here there was a study which said that even in the police database, its ability to identify like a white male is so much higher than being able to identify a female person of color. And I think we see these examples every day coming up. And I think the only way to deal with it is to be able to normalize whatever data that you have with the demography that you are trying to use it on. So, for example, and that is something that Coursera also faces as a challenge. Just to give a very simple example, is that in the US, people play baseball, but baseball is not a sport that a lot of other countries play. And let's say if if an instructor is making a course for the entire world, and if they keep using baseball references, for example, then they might not realize it because they're in the US, but a lot of people might not get that example or might not get what the professor is trying to talk about because no, people don't know it. So in that sense, I think that having diverse people in the team is something that we really value and focus on, is because diverse people bring diverse perspectives. And somebody would be able to point out that, hey, we don't really play baseball in half of the world, so maybe that example will not ring with a lot of these people. So I feel like to be able to make your data unbiased, you'll have to have people in your team or in your culture that somehow reduce the bias. And the only way to do that is, at least in my opinion, is to have a more diverse set of people. Like for the people who are building all of these car testing, if half of their population or if half of the people on their team were women, for example, I'm sure that they would have come up with a better model, just because those would have brought a different perspective. So I feel like all of that starts with the people that are creating the model and how unbiased they are, and their ability to be able to recognize bias in their own data.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Juhi. That was an amazing time interacting with you. And thanks a lot for joining me here. I hope the audience would be able to understand and decide upon their careers. So thank you so much. And guys, if you want to ask any questions from her, I'll leave the links to her socials, LinkedIn and Instagram, in the description, and you can check it out. So thank you so much, Juhi.
Thank you, Shan. Have a nice day.
So that is the podcast episode. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. I personally had a lot of fun talking with her. You can also connect with her. I'll link her social handles in the description, so go check it out. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you are still watching, thank you so much. And just write it down in the comment section below that you are watched till the end, right? You just comment that in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.